My name is John Krivit. I'm from Hey Audio Student. So I don't know whether you know, I've got a Facebook group called Hey Audio Student. We've got about 19,000 members around the world in all different continents except Antarctica. So if someone is from Antarctica, you should join and help us.
They're too cool for us up there.
They are very cool. My partner here is Alex Oana from Audio Test Kitchen. And Alex is doing some really, really interesting things. And we've also got Kelsey from and we want to thank ADAM Audio for putting on this really, really cool event.
Thanks,
and thank you. And so a couple of things I want to just talk about a little bit. One is, and Peter Tilley. Can you guys see Peter Tilley's information? No, I don't think so.
Peter's with Focusrite, and on the technical side of setting up this webinar, he was instrumental. Yes. Thank you, Peter.
And thank you very much. So a few things to talk about. Alex is with, created this incredible project, and I really want to talk about it. And one of the reasons why I'm so interested is that I'm an educator. I teach at Emerson College, and I am always looking for resources for students. I think that that's just, anything that helps people learn. I feel like I'm an old man and I am still learning amazing things about audio. So let's talk a little bit about Alex, you and Audio Test Kitchen. It's been around for how long?
Well, I left my real jobs about 3 years ago, and we launched in October, so about 6 months ago. And we launched with our first gear category of many that we'll cover in the future, and that first category is large diaphragm condenser mics.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And so I have an assignment that I have students go out and do. I actually have them go out and I want them to learn about as much about microphones as possible. I want them to understand the method of transduction. I want them to understand the transient response. I want them to understand the directional response, the frequency response, any kind of self noise that comes out of the microphone, its max SPL, its sensitivity, how much given a certain amount of voltage, how much, or how much voltage it creates given a certain amount of sound pressure level in pascals. And I think that having people actually listen to what these microphones sound like is amazing. It's an amazing opportunity that they really don't get. So I'm fairly new to Audio Test Kitchen. Can you tell me a little bit about how you put this thing together?
Yeah, you talked about all the things, all the aspects, all the characteristics about microphones that you want your students to explore and understand. My partners and I really came at Audio Test Kitchen from the standpoint of wanting to give people the experience of microphones on a free website as if they owned them themselves. So how can we reveal all the characteristics of the microphones in terms of the sound quality, the things that you mentioned, every aspect of a microphone that would affect my decision on should I use it? How would I use it? On what would I use it? Would it sound good on me if I owned it? So that was really our driving goal. And you really have to, in order to tell the full story of microphones or any gear, really dive deep. And one of the key things about Audio Test Kitchen to realize is that when you're setting up these comparisons, you've got to eliminate variables. And I will talk about this forever and forever, because if you're comparing gear and something changed, like the level or the source, that the gear is recording, that you're comparing it on, the conditions of the room, the tuning of the instrument, any of that stuff changes. And when you're going from this piece of gear to that piece of gear, you won't know to what to attribute those changes. So fundamental to what we do is all the 300 microphones, for example, on Audio Test Kitchen right now on the free website, there's no variables when you switch from source to source other than the microphones themselves. Yeah. So this really helps people focus in on the one thing that matters. What does this piece of gear sound like compared to that piece of gear? Yeah. And the ability to do it across hundreds of things, that's what that's what took the deep dive for us. That's what required going to the Anechoic Chamber at Harman for 2 months. That's what required 8 months of audio production and post-production. So we can get into all the deep dives that we did, including lasers.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So if this is a free resource for anyone, is that right? So I can assign to my students who want to learn more about microphones. Next year, when I give them this microphone research project, I can say, I want you to spend 1 hour on Audio Test Kitchen and check out the sounds of these microphones and maybe give me some information about what you learned from them.
I certainly hope it remains free. We've had really great support from manufacturers. So 54 microphone manufacturers, and I'm doing the green screen glitch out thing here, just because as like an artistic thing. Because
it's good. You look a little like David Bowie when you do that.
Awesome. Hey, I'll take that. So we had 54 microphone manufacturers send us their gear. We had and we've got advertisers. Our advertisers really make Audio Test Kitchen possible to be a free resource for everybody. And so if you see any one of those manufacturers advertising on our site, please go visit their site, check them out. And just to be clear, another like main it's a like platform of Audio Test Kitchen is being unbiased. And just so you know, there was no way actually that we could be biased towards any one manufacturer or another, because every piece of gear, and in this case every microphone, ran through the exact same process under the exact same conditions. So there's no way that we could inject bias into the process. Yeah. So fortunately, oddly enough, in our case, advertising and lack of bias can equally coexist.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why you decided you wanted to start this.
Oh man, so I've been an audio engineer since I was about 18 years old, and before that I was just completely sucked in by audio. One of my earliest memories was crawling around the floor, probably about age 4 or 5, behind my dad's floor standing speakers, and I think we were listening to one of these Let's Pretend vinyl records with sound effects on it. And I think it was like the moment that the freight train went by, my dad's floor standing speakers with like the 10-inch woofer rumbled in this certain way, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and my whole body felt this rumbling noise, and that was it for me. From that moment on, I kept seeking out these audio experiences. And so I realized, even if you're a non-audio, non-technical person, most of the world are musical people. And whether they're cognizant of it or not, what happens, the audio experiences are transformative. Let's look at like on the negative side. You're near a bus stop and it pulls up and the brakes squeak and it's piercing. You're in a restaurant, the sound is overwhelming. Someone has a voice that grates on you, fingernails on a chalkboard. But on the opposite side of that, a certain piece of music, the way that it's written in terms of the rhythms and the harmonies coming together, the characteristics of the voice, all these things, and through the engineering, this is all sound design. This is all creation and manipulation and delivery of sound. And we seek these experiences over and over again. And I'm convinced that as audio engineers, part of the zen of recording and mixing and composing is really about being in that transformative space
Yeah.
over and over again. I mean, how can we possibly work on the same mix
Well,
for
but
hours and days?
I don't know that I'd agree that everyone feels that. I think that there's a subset of our population, and you see them all at NAMM, you see them all at the AES convention. They're the people that go crazy when they see a microphone, or they go crazy when they see a mixing console or a piece of audio software, or an amazing loudspeaker monitor. That's the kind of person that I really connect with. And I know that those people would go crazy if they all knew about the Audio Test Kitchen. I think it just becomes this resource that everybody has got to use. So,
Well, John, can I ask you what about it in its use? And I know you're new to Audio Test Kitchen. What do you think the potential is for the people that you're describing?
well, I'm always thinking about the lowest common denominator. I don't assume that everyone can afford an ELAM 251, a $10,000 microphone. I think that some of us might have to settle for less, or maybe when we're starting out as a student, we can afford a $200 microphone, or a $400 or a $600 microphone if we're lucky. And so let's maybe think about that and at least have some idea how we can benchmark what really good sound is. And I really like the fact that we can look at actually on your page, and we can hear what does the bass sound like with this microphone. What does the guitar sound like with this microphone? What does a male voice sound like? What does a hip hop voice sound like versus maybe a folk voice? And you really get a great nuance. I'm also looking at something that's very interesting to me are modeling microphones. So I know a bunch of different companies have started to come out with modeling microphones. The educational opportunity for something like that is really incredible, because you can take one microphone and you can make it, have the characteristics and the frequency response and the polar response to mimic lots of different microphones. So the possibilities for learning are amazing, or through the roof.
Absolutely. And imagine being able to compare all of those things equally. So the $80 microphone or the $200 microphone to the $10,000 microphone, with the variables of the source never changing. The level doesn't change at all. The tuning, the pitch. And just so people know, all the recordings, all the audio on Audio Test Kitchen is real recordings of air molecules, in the room. This we didn't model something. We didn't actually. There's one exception where we used an impulse response, and I'll tell you why if we get that far into our journey. But so this is actually how these microphones sound, picking up real sources in the air, and that's the important thing. And yeah, man, what's also cool is that with a simple filter, and we'll check out the website in a little bit, you can compare anything. You can compare tube mic to solid state. You can compare, so wherever you want to dive in, you're like, hey, I'm getting, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm looking for that lifetime microphone now, and I'm going to spend $3,000. I'm going to spend $6,000. That's totally cool. Or you can say, hey, what microphone under $400 sounds as close to that $3,000 microphone as possible? All totally possible.
One thing I know is that you did some work with Harman.
Yeah.
And you worked with Dr. Sean Olive. Sean Olive is a brilliant guy. He was the president of the Audio Engineering Society before me. And he, one of the things that he says often is that there's not necessarily a correlation between price and quality of a headphone. That sometimes a headphone can be very, very expensive and it's not really perceived as great quality. And sometimes there's a very affordable headphone that is perceived to be really, something terrific. Are you finding that kind of thing with microphones?
I'm finding that there are discoveries to be made. There's no one rule that, expensive mics are not worth it. That's not true.
Yeah.
Expensive mics, you get something for that. You get the best possible build quality. You get usually human beings QCing them and tuning them and making sure that the consistency is perfect. You get the highest level of components and parts. You may get a bigger warranty. You may even get the prestige of a brand name that is important to you in your job. Like, does it have a recognizable badge and name that is important to you, like getting the clients you want to get?
Yeah, sure.
Does it have that level of refinement? Oftentimes that last 5 or 10% is the most expensive in terms of time and in terms of money to create. So, expensive microphones are oftentimes expensive for those reasons. I find that there's correlations usually between those levels of quality and price, but that is also changing a bit. And without naming any specific names, I think there's a lot of discoveries to be made in lower prices. In general, yes, the market is coming down such that better quality, and in all those ways, I mean, not just sound quality, but the build quality, the quality of the components, the QCing, those things are becoming much more affordable and approachable. But again, I want to underscore that our job is not to highlight any one particular microphone or brand. Yeah. It's to reveal all the possibilities within a category. It's to show people, is to allow people to make their own discoveries, their own decisions. And John, this is like the driving force. Like, you may have asked this at the beginning of this interview, why did we create Audio Test Kitchen? But we felt like there was such a pain out there with people all having the same question and having to go to multiple sources. Let me try to read this magazine article. Let me try to read this guy's opinion online, and let me talk to a sales rep over here, and let me do all this mishmash research. I'll maybe see if I can find a YouTube video, but none of it was connected, and none of it was cross-comparable. So Audio Test Kitchen, for the first time, it really delivers a way for the consumer to have an efficient process to become confident in their choice about what they're getting into. And we really just wanted to make it, give people the opportunity to understand, what would it be like if I owned this?
Yeah. Well, one of the things, I have a predisposition towards, I like things that are not necessarily expensive and you get great value for them. So that being, admitting to that, I absolutely loved listening to some of these top-end, really super expensive microphones. I don't get a chance to put up, some of these really great microphones, and to be able to listen to them and to really hear the difference pretty quickly and pretty easily was kind of mind-bending to me, that I could definitely hear the difference even as it streamed between one really great microphone and another really great microphone.
That is music to my ears.
Yeah.
That was our goal.
I think so. Let me just ask you something before we get to that, because I know people are still joining us. You're from Minnesota? No, you're from Michigan.
Yeah, I grew up in Michigan. Let's see here. Is this the right way to look at it, or is this reversed? Oh, wait. Is that the mitten? Are we the right way? There we go. So I'm from the middle of the mitten in Michigan, and a little town called Mount Pleasant. I spent a lot of time on Lake Michigan up here by Traverse City, Elk Rapids. And then when I went off to college, I went to Minnesota, a little liberal arts college called St. Olaf. And that's when my life really changed, because everybody around, I grew up a musician playing various instruments, and then everybody around me, it's a very musical school, St. Olaf College. And that's when there was a campus nightclub. I started mixing live sound on a PV 24 channel board with one outboard effect, no compressors, fixed frequency 4-band EQs. So I had been, I told you that my origin was like hi-fi and listening to recordings, and The first reading that I loved was not books; it was magazines like Popular Science and Stereophile and Consumer Reports.
Yep.
Okay, so you can see how these things are coming together to my interest in like the science of it, the comparison, and the passion of audio.
Yeah.
It's all right there in the magazines I read as a kid.
So let me ask you, did you study specifically audio? Was it a specific audio degree or was it something else?
It was not an audio degree. St. Olaf did not offer that. But I was actually a Russian language major. And then sometime in my sophomore year, the Berlin Wall came down. And so the idea of being the ambassador to the Soviet Union, which was what I was planning on doing, just became a lot less interesting.
Yeah.
And I also like, I'm a non-academic type of person. I'm much more like experiential. And so I was like, no more school for me. I don't want to get a master's degree. I want to do my passion. And so I actually was able to fortunately invent my own degree through St. Olaf. At the time, they had a program designed after the Oxford tutorial system where you could design your own curriculum, you work with an advisor. And so I created my own degree called Creative Expression Through Sound, Poetry, and Video.
Wow.
And darn if I'm not doing those exact things in my career, although
That's
no
great.
one has ever asked to see my diploma.
All right. So let me ask you this question, because I think a lot of people on Hey Audio Student are there because they want to know, how do you make the transition from student with this esoteric degree to person actually making money from audio?
I love this question because I talked about how being at college changed my life. So how did it change my life? It was my network. It was the people that I met there. All these musicians, I talked about the PV board in the campus nightclub. I started recording them. I got a buddy's cassette deck, and we went in and made live recordings on the weekends and in the wee hours, and that continued after college. And so I already had this network of bands that I was working with, and I was mixing live sound. That actually was my first profession before I was really a professional recording engineer. So I love that we right now have the opportunity to give some advice to people who still have a chance to set the course of their career and their life. And I think one of the most important considerations when you're thinking about should I go to school, where should I go to school, is really thinking about the network and your location. Because for me, my whole life was changed by the people that I met in school and where I was.
Yeah.
St. Olaf College is near Minneapolis, so we moved to Minneapolis as soon as we could after college, and there's an incredible musical scene there. Shout out to James Fluff Harley and all the hundreds of bands that I've worked with in Minnesota. And man, all the musicians I met in Minnesota, the opportunities I had to do live sound for them and then transition. I bought, at that time, really affordable, awesome audio gear was hard to come by. We're talking about the era of the first affordable Mackie mixers, ADAT recorders, which were the first really accessible home digital recorders, 8 tracks at a time, So I invested every last penny that I saved by doing my live sound gigs. I got one ADAT. I bought a couple of good microphones. And at the time, the AKG 414 transformerless microphones that I bought at the time, they were really expensive. Yep. And you can get quality like that, as you were saying earlier, at a much lower price point. But I kept investing back into my own craft and into my own learning. And the other huge opportunity that people have now is, I didn't have somebody like you. I didn't have someone teaching me. I didn't have the internet I didn't have Audio Test Kitchen to go learn about microphones from. I didn't have YouTube videos. I didn't have, Warren Hewitt and Produce Like a Pro and Pensado's Place and ADAM Audio doing webinars. And man, the opportunities now are huge in terms of being able to learn on your own.
Yeah. So what did you do? You moved to Minneapolis. You started doing whatever gigs you could get. Did you have a day job while you were doing that stuff, or what were you doing?
Dude, I was so lucky. My day job was being a live sound engineer. So here's another super important thing, I think, for our industry or for any industry: communication. Be a good communicator.
Hmm.
Be friendly. Be somebody people want to work with.
Yeah.
I remember this very pivotal moment. There's a club in Minneapolis, still exists today, called the Fine Line Music Cafe. So I was fresh out of St. Olaf College. I'd worked for a local live sound company in where St. Olaf is, down in Northfield, Minnesota, about an hour south of the Twin Cities. So I worked
Hmm.
for this live sound production company called Day Productions, and I got introduced to the guy who had installed the system at the the Fine Line, and they were like, "Hey, why don't you go work there a couple of nights a week?" And
Hmm.
so I was like, "This is my dream." I remember a couple of years before that, I had passed by outside the windows of the Fine Line Music Cafe, and through the glass, I could
Hmm.
see the lights on the stage, and I could see the LED meters going on the board like
Yeah.
this.
Great.
And I turned to my girlfriend at the time and I said, "Someday I'm going to be mixing on that board in that
That's
room."
awesome. What kind
And
of
then
board?
oh man, it was a Sound Trax, Tracs, and the power supply kept going out. Like I remember a few really inopportune times when it would sound like the ocean coming out of the stage monitors because of these bad caps in the power supply. But really, it was that I once I got in that room, I
Hmm.
immediately set about making relationships, creating relationships with people, like
Yeah.
the bar staff, the bouncers, the managers, the chefs, everybody, because
Yeah.
everybody. Not, I mean, look at everybody's important, number one,
Yeah.
and I like, I'm curious about people. I value people. I value
Yeah.
all those people there were making my job possible.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
people serving the drinks, the people cooking the food, the manager, the bouncer, and I just appreciated the opportunity that I had to do the thing that I loved.
Yeah.
So I remember there was a moment, as I said, where the manager of the club, who was going to decide who got the permanent job of being the house sound engineer at the Fine Line, and
Hmm.
he said, "Okay, Alex, it's between you and the other guy. Why should I pick you?"
Hmm.
And I was ready. I was ready with an answer, and
What
I
was the
pitched.
answer?
I told him about myself. I told him about my passion.
Hmm.
And I told him that he wasn't just getting somebody with great ears who could mix, but I told him he was getting somebody who, who really cared.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's evident in all the success that you have had in your career in audio. And I will say, for anyone who's younger, who's thinking about getting in, what I've found is that when I was younger, I used to think, oh, I need something brilliant to say so that George Massenburg will think I can't do it without this young 22-year-old kid, and that's never going to happen. So, what I think people a little bit older, my age, who might be hiring, are most impressed with is not what you know, but really your curiosity, your upside, what that you are. If I would much rather hire the kid that says, I want to know everything about that and learn as much as I can about that, than the kid that says, I already know everything and that's the way my professor told us to do it. And that's probably not as appealing to me. So I always say it's perfectly fine to say I don't know that much about this, but I really would love to learn as much as I possibly can, and I'm going to go back and study. If you show up at an Audio Engineering Society convention or conference, and you're a young person, it's completely cool to say, you know what, I'm just in my first semester learning about I'd like to learn as much as I possibly can, and that's why I'm here at the at the AES convention, or that's why I'm here at this conference, or that's why I'm here at NAMM. And those things are really helpful. So you went on after that, you went to work for, how'd you go from live sound guy to what you're doing now? Just quickly, give us a little bit of it.
Totally. So I found my friendship with the bouncer at the club. He was a real estate agent on the side, and he told me about this little house by the University of Minnesota that used to be some famous recording studio where like Prince and Soul Asylum and the Replacements had all worked. And so it was this little house with a studio in it, but with an actual like piece of glass between two rooms. And so I bought the house. It became the flop house for my musician buddies. And we started making records out of there, and slowly but surely I built that up over a decade. Ended up moving to California, had more of like a remote mixing business. Then I started writing for Pro Audio Review, Sound on Sound. I started working with Vintage King, learned about sales and the business and manufacturers and distribution and margins and product creation and all this stuff. Then I met Stephen Slate actually at an AES show in New York. He was on the cover, his product was on the cover of Sound on Sound. I was on the cover of Pro Audio Review, and we kicked off an incredible conversation where we had a meeting of the minds. He hired me as his vice president. I created a product called The Raven, spent 2 years developing that, went back to Vintage King to do some sales and marketing, and that's when really things clicked for me, realizing that, now we're talking about how entrepreneurs think. I noticed this pain point, as it's called, in the market that kept coming up. And that was that people were lacking the fundamental information about audio products. How do they sound? So my partners and I set out to change that. So now we can compare. Oh, go ahead.
You want to show us the audio test kitchen? I'll bet people are going crazy for it.
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
I'll bet people are hungry.
Oh yeah. Well, let's bring up something tasty.
It's lunchtime, so I'll try to keep these metaphors to a small.
So this is our landing page that folks might see if they visit audiotestkitchen.com. And here, let me just refresh that real quick. So there's a lot you can learn just on our landing page. When you hit this go button, that's when you go to the free web app. And these are all of our partners. And let's see, this is reloading. Sorry about that, guys. And okay, we'll ignore that for now. It's live, everybody. There's no script, or is there, John?
Barely.
So I really encourage people to go to the our homepage here, audiotestkitchen.com, and learn a little about what we do, all the partners we worked with. Watch this video that's called the Nutshell video. In 1 minute, you can see a lot of our journey and how we did it. You can see some of the technical stuff that went behind what we did. You can see a really sweet ADAM Audio speaker there with lasers on it and an AKG microphone. And please, everybody, sign up join our newsletter. We're going to roll out the newsletter. We really haven't actually done much with it yet. We're waiting. We're designing the stuff right now, but please join us. The reason is because we've got a ton of new content for these 300 microphones. We've only released 2 songs, but we've got 2 more plus a bunch of individual solo sources we're going to be releasing. So join this newsletter. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to sell your information. And so once you hit this go button at the top, it's going to launch you right into the app. So this is Audio Test Kitchen.
Wow. So how would I test a microphone? What happens? I one thing I would just say is let's maybe not play the audio just because it's
not going to come across right.
Yeah, I'll let people do that. But how would we switch microphones?
Guys, this area right here is cleverly called the taste test. There's 5 slots, and this is where you do your audio comparing. The 6th slot is reserved for the mystery mic. A microphone might come up that's related to the ones that you're checking out. When you first navigate to the app, a default welcome session is going to load, and a few microphones will be up there, for example, for you guys to check out. Selecting the different microphones is as easy as clicking on them, and you can see that an audio waveform is loaded up here. This menu is called the source menu, and it's where you can see individual sources on 2 different songs. Right now we have like an old school LA hip hop track and the individual sources within that, including a drum stem and a dry mix. And then there's another song that is a kind of a more singer-songwriter song with featuring Sean Watkins on acoustic guitar and Ian Latke on piano and Jessica Streitfeld on vocals. And there's a really cool thing we did. I got to take a second to point out. So you can hear those as solo sources, like I was saying, right? You can just hear this rap vocalist. But you can also hear what's called the stacked effect. The stacked effect is every one of these sources all together at the same time on whichever microphone you're listening to. And what it has is the effect of naturally amplifying whatever the characteristics are of that particular microphone, because you're not just recording and comparing one audio source. Like, I don't know, I can't really tell the differences just hearing the vocal. But what if you could hear an entire band, an entire production through each microphone? You can hear vocals, a guitar, drums, bass, piano, all stacked up at once. Whatever the characteristics are of that microphone really come through in a much more obvious way. So that's the source selection. That's a really important thing. Once you're a logged in user, so logging in is free, I want you guys to click on this search magnifying glass here, and what will be revealed is a huge selection of 300 microphones. And since I'm doing a Zoom right now, we're doing a live stream. This is responding a little bit slow on my end because there's quite a lot of data to load here. A lot of microphones. I want to show you guys another way to search. You can go right here to this search filters, and let's say, oh gosh, people talk about the U47 a lot. So let's just search the number 47. Not select any price ranges. By the way, you can look at individual brands here, but let's just look at 47 and see what comes up. So because there's a lot of audio and other assets loading on this app, it's kind of like we built a DAW and a sampler and a library online, on a website. So things can take a little bit longer to load than like if you were shopping for a pair of jeans, for example, right? So here we have a bunch of microphones that are 47s. So I'm just going to put the microphones that are currently in the taste test, I'm going to move those to what's called the cupboard. And that's a little area that is where you can create your own collection to test out. And that cupboard, if you want to go find where your microphones are, is right here under the search. But right now, we can just simply drag and drop a microphone from search into the taste test. So there I put the King Daddy $9,000 Telefunken U47. Hey, let's put the Neumann FET 47 up there. Let's drag that right into the taste test. Although maybe not the fairest comparison, because this is a solid state mic and this one is a tube mic. Here we have, oh, you know what? Let's get down to, you mentioned modeling microphones, John. Mm-hmm. Here we have a Townsend Labs modeling microphone. It's modeling a U47. Here we have a Slate U47. So it's really cool how this is, I mean, it's so crazy building something. We built Audio Test Kitchen to be a solution for people, but we're really, really curious people ourselves.
Sure.
And when we finally launched Audio Test Kitchen and we're able to do the comparisons ourselves, our minds were blown. I mean, these are questions I've always had, like, what does a Slate modeling mic really sound like compared to a Townsend modeling mic, compared to the, a reissue Telefunken U47, and compared to, hey, here's Antelopes.
Yeah.
Let's put that one up. So you guys, you can compare. You can do whatever you want. You could compare all the 414s and their clones. You could compare just the modeling microphones just on C800s. You can compare the modeling microphones, C800 models, to the original Sony C800. So the possibilities are endless, but
yeah,
just for exploring. But the cool thing is that by listening to enough sources, by listening to the stacked effect, by listening to individual sources, you can really build a picture of how these things compare to one another. And we wanted to give...
I'm sorry, speaking of picture, can we... Well, it looks like you just did what I was going to ask you to do, which is the frequency response graph for each one.
Yeah. So this was mind-blowing for us. And this is where, if you guys can see this logo down here, Harman, you mentioned Sean Olive earlier. We worked really closely with Sean Olive, Dr. Sean Olive, and Todd Welty and Omid Kansarapur and Dan Pai out at Harman. We got so lucky to have the opportunity to meet them, tell them about what we were doing. And they are so research driven, and they're driven by curiosity. Mm-hmm. And without worrying about brand conflicts or manufacturer conflicts, they entirely driven just by the fascination of, whoa, what would it be like if we had 250 physical microphones here in our anechoic chamber and measured them all? What would it, and so after us doing a quick 5-minute pitch, they said, this sounds really interesting. We'd like to help you. And that was a pivotal moment for us, because we could not have generated these industry standard frequency response comparisons for all of these microphones without Harman's help. They were done in their 4-pi anechoic chamber. And what that means, it's a chamber that has absorption on all sides. It's got, that springy, chicken wire bed frame floor that you can see through and drop, your pen and your iPhone
don't
through.
Drop it. Don't drop anything.
So we spent 2 months in there doing our tests, refining our capture process, and that's where the ADAM speaker that we ended up using to recreate acoustic sources like vocals. That's where we discovered that the ADAM was the best speaker for doing that. So
I'm sorry, you couldn't just have a singer sing, because if they're singing the exact same thing 300 times or 900 times or 3,000 times, they're going to fluctuate in terms of level, volume. By the end, it's going to sound a lot different. So I think that's really interesting. You used a monitor to play the exact same signal. And was that the idea of Sean and the Harman team, or is that something you came up with?
Well, we came up with it, but I and other members of my team were really resistant to the idea of using a loudspeaker as a surrogate for the human voice. Mm-hmm. Being an audio engineer and producer and having worked with so many singers over the years, I just, there's such an intimate connection between a voice and a microphone. Yeah. I was just very skeptical that we could actually create that same kind of intimacy and realism with a loudspeaker going into a microphone. So we did everything we could to find another way. We spent a long time working on other production techniques to try to eliminate the variability of a human performance, but we just couldn't do it. Yeah. So, and then while we in our process of working with and onboarding microphone manufacturers, we actually got information from them, stories from them saying that in their development process, they used a loudspeaker to develop their microphones. They because they wanted to, as they were tweaking the sound of the mic, to be sure that their source didn't change. And we just...
So you can't use just any loudspeaker, because loudspeakers have frequency response and they have all kinds of characteristics. So I imagine that you had to choose your loudspeaker really wisely. And what did you use?
Well, we spent months. We looked through all the available high-end studio monitors, every brand you can think of. And we were working at the time in a really cool mastering studio called Infrasonic Sound. That's happens to be parked above Vintage King Audio in LA. And Jeff Ehrenberg is, and I used to work for Vintage King, and while we don't have any like bias towards Vintage King or any other dealer or retailer, they were really cool in loaning us whatever monitors we wanted to check out. So for months, we were trying to perfect this reamplification process. First of all, you got to pick a microphone to capture the human voice, to capture an acoustic guitar. Which microphone are you going to choose? At what distance are you going to mic it? And then which speaker are you going to use to reproduce that? So we'd spent a while refining that. We got it down. We knew that there was a particular Schoeps microphone, the CMC6 body with an MK2 Omni capsule, and a DPA microphone, the classic 4011. Those were our capture mics. We found that out, but we weren't totally dialed in on the speaker. And then fortunately, ADAM Audio showed up right when we needed them to. And I said, I'm really curious about these ribbon tweeters. Is it possible that what a ribbon tweeter claims to do, the efficiency, the speed, that maybe the dynamic response and the transient response of the ribbon tweeter would be most like the instantaneous acoustic sound of a real source, a real acoustic source. And so we put up our best choices for monitors. We had an ATC SCM 45. Right. Yes, the dual woofer one, and we had an ADAM S3H, and the ADAM S3H turned out to produce most naturally, most realistically, the sound of the human voice, and we got it with no digital manipulation to the 95% mark, where we were in there in the chamber. We captured acoustic sources and vocals with no artifacts because the chamber allowed us to capture a pure sound. And then we would reamplify that through the ADAM speaker. And it got to the point where it was like, whoa, if you couldn't ever hear the original source, you would never know that this was a reamplified thing. And we're like, great, we won. But we couldn't stop there. Because here we had these scientists at Harman, these guys they do like the magical stuff, right? So we said, we're at the 95% mark, guys. Can you help us make it perfect? Can you help us make it so that no one could tell the difference between a live vocal and a reamplified one? And so we worked with Todd Welty very closely, a Harman research scientist, and we got it to the point where in a blind test, you couldn't tell whether it was a live vocal being sung into a mic or a reamplified one coming through the ADAM S3H.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. So playing those back, really phenomenal. So I'm curious, so right now we've got large diaphragm condenser microphones.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. So we had to pick something to start with, and I thought that what I should do, just for a second, John, I realized I was doing a lot of talking, a lot of telling without showing, and I thought it could be cool if I showed you a little bit of what we went through to capture some of this stuff. I'll show you some images from the Anechoic Chamber. So here's the video might be a little bit laggy. So I'm just going to park it on this. Here's a couple of the Harman research scientists. We've got Dr. Sean Olive. We've got Omid Kansarapur, not shown, Todd Welty. That's the Anechoic Chamber. Here we were setting up a cool shot at Chris Lord-Alge's Can-Am Studio A. That's where we captured the kick drum and the snare drum. Here we've got Sean Watkins in the Anechoic Chamber capturing his acoustic guitar. Here we have Jesse Ray Ernster, actually not actually recording electric guitar, but just posing with it for the video. Here we've got Eric Louisel, who's an incredible bass player, played our live bass parts. We've got so this is a picture of a Yamaha. Check this out. For piano, we used a self-playing Yamaha Disclavier. Yamaha, when we told them about this idea, they got super stoked, and they're like, we're going to send you a top-of-the-line self-playing Disclavier acoustic piano, and you can park it there at East West. And so we were able to capture an acoustic source out of the piano. Here's us capturing vocals. This is 4 of the 6 vocalists that we captured. Here they are in Harman's Anechoic Chamber.
So the Anechoic Chamber, forgive me for anyone who needs to know, there's no echo, no reflection. It's complete absorption, so the room won't affect what's going on with recording with the microphone.
Yeah, and why that's important is because you don't want any artifacts other than the actual acoustic source that you're recording. So when we had a vocalist performing in the chamber, that meant that what this Schoeps microphone was picking up was only their voice. So that when we, in place of this human being's face, put a loudspeaker, ADAM S3H, it sounded just the same as that person's face being right in front of the in front of all those 300 microphones.
Now, I also noticed that you had lasers that you align the
totally. So super important to use here. Can I get to lasers in just one second?
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit more about the source. So drums. How do you keep drums consistent? Well, it turned out to be our Mount Everest, James Fluff Harley, shout out, because we spent months trying to get acoustic drums, a kick drum, a snare drum, hi-hat, tambourine. So these are instruments that reveal the nature of the microphones. A kick drum tuned way low reveals, the sub frequencies, the transients, the punch. A snare drum and microphones in a room recording a snare drum reveal all kinds of things about the off-axis response, and same thing with hi-hats and tambourine, transient response, high frequencies. So we ended up employing these, they're called PERC, and they're made by a company called Polyend, and we call them our little drum robots, and we ended up building on customized stands from Latch Lake. We built these kind of permanent drum robots so this little ball thing you see here has a wooden striker that comes out, and when you program it with MIDI, it plays the exact same performance the same way every time. And so we were able to, for example, recording hi-hat, recording tambourine over the course of a week, from Monday morning at 10 a.m. to when we were done with it, all 250 physical microphones a week later. Performance number 1, pass number 1 sounded identical to pass number 250 5 days later. I mean, this was phenomenal that we were able to achieve this.
Wow.
And we were able to know that we were maintaining that consistency because we always had a reference microphone, a DPA or a Schoeps, parked above or next to the acoustic source we were recording. So we could always know whether we were on track or not. So you asked about lasers. Let's go back to one of these first images. You can see a lot of lasers happening here. Lasers allowed us to ensure that the microphones were always in the same position to one another. So we would find the sweet spot where we were going to capture an acoustic source, be it in front of an electric guitar amp, electric bass amp, the Disclavier self-playing piano, a kick drum. We pre-marked every microphone because we worked to first find out where exactly under the grill the diaphragm of that microphone lived. So we marked that externally, and then we would use lasers coming from two different directions to align to position the microphone in space, height, distance, twist, every axis, to make sure that it was in the identical position. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of precision to eliminate physical variables. It's really painstaking. So,
Yeah.
but we committed to it because we knew that. I mean, can you imagine? We just had to ask ourselves: can you imagine going out to people and saying, "Hey guys, well, when you compare mics on Audio Test Kitchen, there may be some variables in terms of pitch. We might have got the microphones are pretty close to where we put them. The drums are tuned pretty close. The vocalists did a good job singing consistently." I mean, come on, you cannot make caveats when you're talking about what for some microphones are really subtle differences. So we had to eliminate all variables from the source, so that the only differences heard are the ones between this mic and that mic.
Well, let me ask you, because I know we're running short on time. This is really incredible, and I think people are going to be floored checking out this amazing resource. So you started out with large diaphragm condenser microphones. Are there any other microphones? Are you going to be doing anything with dynamic microphones? Are you doing anything with maybe loudspeakers? Because I can think of a lot of great applications that people would go crazy for. Maybe even cables and connectors, because some people think that it makes a difference, some people don't. Maybe converters, lots of different potential opportunities. What are you thinking?
Man, all of that is relevant. And that's the crazy thing about our industry. These are audio tools, and oftentimes the sound is the most important thing, or it's a thing that is so important that you need to know about the sonic performance of something before you make a decision about it. Am I going to buy it? Am I going to use it in my next session? Am I going to recommend it to somebody? So all those gear categories that you mentioned, John, all of those are relevant. So, for example, cabling, we were fortunate to use AccuSound cable to ensure that every audio signal coming up to our Grace preamps was as pristine and neutral and transparent as possible. But yes, every audio comparison is relevant. Cables, dynamic microphones, small diaphragm, ribbon microphones, audio interfaces, monitors, loudspeakers, headphones, anything you can think of in the audio world. And we've gotten so much incredible feedback from, for example, the videos that we've done with Graham Cochran of Recording Revolution, Chris Salim of Mixdown Online, Liz Shaw podcast, Recording Studio Rockstars, Working Class Audio, Warren Hewitt, Produced Like a Pro. Their audience, these are our people, and they've all come to us and said, would you please make it possible for us to compare acoustic guitars, strings, bass guitars, all Stratocasters from $99 to $10,000, whatever. Electric guitar amps. What is not comparable in this way? So everything is, and we intend to make it possible for everyone to be able to compare everything. So it's just a matter of time, and we'd actually love to hear your feedback on everybody who's listening on what you'd like to hear, what's important to you.
I would. I definitely think that this is an amazing resource. The one thing about audio people, we talked about what makes you an audio person, what makes me an audio person. Audio people want to keep learning. And this is, if you're at home during this lockdown, wherever you are in the world, you've got a Telefunken U47 to listen to. And you can compare it to an Elam 251, and you can compare it to a $100 microphone from MXL that might be really good too. There's lots of really interesting stuff out there. So I think that that's something. I think I'd love to hear you, or I'd love to see you do something with loudspeakers. I
Mm,
think that that would just be incredible. People are always talking to me about loudspeakers and what they should get, and what's a good affordable brand, or what for this price or that price. And I think people would kind of go crazy if there was a vehicle like this for looking at loudspeakers. Um,
totally agree. And we've already been talking with Harman about using their standardized listening room
mhm.
and their chambers to capture loudspeakers in that environment. We've already spoken with some manufacturers, including ADAM Audio, Cali Audio, and we intend to deliver. Actually, that's the next gear category we are intending to dive into.
Wow. Well, I think that that's something. I think there's a movement I know to what I tell a lot of people is sometimes you can find an affordable pair of loudspeakers and use loudspeaker calibration, something like SonarWorks, to flatten the frequency response. But I think it's good to be able to hear some of these different loudspeakers. I think it would be really ideal, just like we can test microphones. Um, this has been really incredible. I think that, one thing I'll say is that, big gratitude to Kelsey McDuffie from ADAM Audio. ADAM Audio is a great company, and they do a lot of great things for the education community. They're very supportive. They usually get out to colleges and universities, and really all over the United States, but really all over the world. And they're very supportive and of education. And I think being on a place on the internet and being able to help us with this is really spectacular. So shout out to ADAM Audio.
And
Uh,
hey, can I just throw in a note? Like, I don't know if people, I've been, through my history with Vintage King and creating products through Slate. I understand manufacturers really well. I understand retailers really well. And just for people listening right now, I hope you don't feel like skeptical or sold to, or like you're being pitched or something like that when you hear this, because the people behind these companies, they are just real people like us, and they're super passionate. And can you imagine a world if without passionate gear creators? Can you imagine, like, what would we do if we didn't have these tools, if we didn't have these great mics, if we didn't have the software, if we didn't have awesome studio monitors to do our work on? So I really encourage everybody to just think how powerful that is when somebody like, we had a bunch of people help with Audio Test Kitchen and sponsor us. I say in quotes because like there wasn't any money exchange, but they helped us. They loaned us gear. We talked to their engineers. We exchange expertise, and how should we go about creating a resource with 300 microphones that for the first time ever allows people to compare the sound of them in an unbiased way online. So really show some love to the manufacturers. There are people there. We got
sure.
Anders and Kelsey, and Peter at Focusrite, and all these people who made this possible today. And you've got people behind the scenes at these microphone companies that are just as passionate as you are about audio or music. They're these people who are creating these tools for us to create, and
Yeah.
I'm endlessly grateful to them.
Sure. And I'll also say, for people who are looking to get involved in the audio industry, that, I have lots of students who go off and they might graduate from school and they go to work for a company like Isotope or Avid or Motu or any of the regional companies that are near Boston, where I am. And they are uh, learning, and a lot of them will tell me, John, I came to school because I wanted to be able to, make music. And I'm actually surprised to be so satisfied. I'm actually making the tools that musicians make and that they use to make music. So whether it's loudspeakers or microphones, there's so much that the manufacturers really contribute. And as an educator, I'm all about working with these companies. So I'm grateful for all of the companies that supported the great work that you did here, Alex. And I'm grateful for ADAM Audio for putting on this platform. And I hope that we can continue this conversation. I'm always available on Facebook at Hey Audio Student. And how can people get you if they want to reach out to you?
I am pretty active on Audio Test Kitchen's Facebook messaging, and people can reach me. You can just email me info@Audio Test Kitchen if you want to. And I'm all about being, about this community and talking, and I'll answer any question from anybody. I just want to help people as much as I possibly can. We are all on a continuous journey, and I've been supported by so many people. I would love to support anybody who needs it.
Yeah. Well, I would also say you're probably going to be able to meet if you show up at things like the NAMM show or the AES convention. Hopefully we'll get those things back on track after all of this. But if you show up at some of those things, that's where you meet people like Alex, or you meet people like Kelsey, or you meet all kinds of folks who recognize that you're there because you're equally curious. And it's just a wonderful way to learn, and a wonderful way to make connections, and a wonderful way to find yourself in the middle of this great community. So I guess we should probably sign off, but I want to again thank Peter Tilley and Kelsey McDuffie and Anders. And guys, thank you so much for making this possible. And I'll see you guys at Hey Audio Student and Audio Test Kitchen.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Man, I really appreciate your questions. You have been giving so much to this community for so many years. I would love to turn the tables around at some point and interview you and ask more about where you came from. You were just mentioned, for example, in a Resolution article about you were part of Warren Hewart's origin story. He credits you with being someone who got him to start thinking about education. And now we have this huge YouTube channel and community, Produce Like a Pro. And you were part of that. So, hey, guys, we are all in this together. Thank you, John. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And we'll post this on the ADAM page so that anyone can go back and watch it as well if you missed anything.
Great.
If anyone has any questions, you can drop them in the comments below and we'll get to them.